So maybe it's an age thing or going through a life altering kind of thing, or maybe it's a little bit of both. Welcome to This Life Reconsidered, and my name is Jenina. On this channel, I focus on personal development, self-discovery, self-care, and then there's navigating that whole work-life integration situation. If you think those are the kind of videos that you're interested in getting, then you may want to hit that subscription button on the lower right. So this is a very weird time. I just fairly recently, within the last few weeks, had a birthday, and in the last few years had survived just kind of like a really big milestone in my life, and realized that my priorities have drastically changed, but for the better. I like to think that it's a mix of getting into this part of adulthood that makes me a lot more confident about how it is that I'm living life, and also, realizing that as time passes, I just get a lot clearer of how I fit in the universe, and it's also kind of like a really interesting time to especially get reflective on kind of what it is I value and the way that I used to see things, and then maybe just kind of realizing that there is a value in getting to a point in which you're so much more comfortable in your skin that your priorities and the way that you approach life has evolved, especially drastically different from when I was in my 20s, and I was very, very focused on like output and making things happen, and that's the way for many people that it's logical, you just kind of live in the moment. But after many years of living in the moment and being very fixated on very, very superficial priorities, you just realize that you kind of get to a point in which, the tables kind of shift a little bit. So I got to thinking about all of that and realized that some of the most critical things that are a part of all of our lives once you get into adulthood have completely evolved. And I was thinking about how they've changed. And so that's kind of how I wanted to kind of approach this video, just kind of underscoring the difference of where I was to where I would be, and kind of see if some of this kind of also resonates with you as you think about your own journey through these big milestones and these big parts of our lives. So just some things I just kind of wanted to put out there and kind of share, and also encourage you to think about too. Okay, so number one is career. I have created a string of videos informed from my very, very intensive professional journey, 10 to 15 years, and I'll link the playlist here. But I've realized that, when I started my journey, I was all about being the model employee and wanting to do everything that it took to climb the ladder. And that's natural, especially when you're trying to make sure that you can kind of secure a certain kind of income for yourself and make sure that you get that next title and climb those ladders. But after years of that grind and having been very fortunate enough to have achieved so many of my goals, now that I'm at this point, I'm much more comfortable enough where I'm at in my career, where not that I don't still aspire to continue to like move and advance and gain what is perceived to be success. I just am a little more gentle with myself on it. And part of that is because the reality is that, you've put a lot of energy into getting to a certain point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to solely live for the climb. So it's kind of like a different softening to my approach. I'm being much more mindful and intentional with the type of energy I commit, allowing myself the flexibility to kind of step back a little bit, not to be as much of a workaholic, and also being much more selective of the environments that I'm in. And that means maybe finding the right boss. That means being surrounded by the right colleagues, being much choosier, because I don't feel as kind of threatened by not advancing, because that's what was important at the very beginning. But now that I'm here, I feel like I kind of, now it's much more about putting myself first. So as long as I'm creating the right situation for myself, then that's all that kind of really matters. And similarly, that also means that sometimes if I want to remove myself out of certain environment or start stepping back, then I'm giving myself the license to do that, because I've worked long enough to know what I can tolerate and what I won't tolerate. And that's something that you have to, as you start climbing, you have to get really, really choosy for yourself. And something that is a personal philosophy that I now embrace, now that I've had a lot more time to kind of live in certain types of environments and realize that it has to be much more about putting myself first. Lesson number 2 is that you learn how to love through good and bad in a strong and quality relationship. And you realize that as you find that partnership and relationship that really truly works for you, that you are not only learning about yourself, but that you are learning how to be a good partner. And that is a difference than finding someone that fits into certain kind of boxes. A good love in a strong relationship teaches you how to be good for another person. And that is something that I didn't think I was able to truly learn until I was able to get to a point into my relationships that they were deepening, the time was extending, and I was getting older, and realizing that I was learning about myself and how I was going to be a partner in a union. And I would say that is something that takes a little bit of time to mature, and sometimes has to more than likely come with longer term relationships. And as you realize, you learn much more about yourself in those relationships. So without a doubt, I would say that love, the way that I approach love now, in my 30s at this point, especially given everything I've been through, has completely and drastically evolved in a way that I am very, very proud of, because I feel like it taught me a whole lot about needing to be a much stronger and much more supportive partner, and not just focus on what I need, but also what my partner needs. Number 3 is friends. Of all of the things on the list, and I have a few that are coming even after this one, I'm going to say that this is the one that has probably drastically changed since my 20s. And it's changed so drastically because the person that I was and the kind of friendships I formed at that time were rooted in very different things. And so that means that my friendships have changed. Now, I am fortunate enough that 2 of my best friends were the closest, 2 of the closest people in a key part of my 20s. But that's not always common. A lot of other of my friendships during that time have completely transformed, and that's just by virtue of getting older, whether that's more serious relationships, whether that's moving across the country or leaving the country, or like having friends that don't work in your job industry anymore. You start changing the kind of friendships you build, because it's very common to form friendships because of jobs, because of school, or because of social situations. But as those situations all start changing, then that means you need to kind of find stronger and deeper connection points to continue to keep you connected to people. And, even the people even friends that I had probably in the last few years have drastically evolved, because our lives have completely evolved, because we've continued to get into a different part of our adulthood in which all of our priorities are changing. And I guess it just kind of like, I think about it because I'm like, oh my God, we were so inseparable. What happened to us? But part of it is just because we're older and we've matured. And I think that for the friendships that have lasted through those changes, it's made me really, really, really hypersensitive to kind of what it is that takes a strong and lasting relationship, and also what it takes to actually put the work if you want to keep those connections. So there's a couple of things, I guess, as I think about it. It's kind of understanding what continues to keep you connected to people as time passes, and then also kind of the effort that you have to put into friendships if you want them to last. And it doesn't mean that you don't eventually find your way back to certain types of friends. You just have to be much more willing to work on it and stay committed and kind of keeping those bonds. They don't always have to be the exact same way, but you just have to learn how to kind of make sure that you are kind of being that kind of friend that continues to kind of put the effort in. And so I've had to learn that lesson too, and not just rely on, you know, the connections that we had a couple years ago, because we've also evolved as people. So something that has really changed for me over the years is family and how I see my family. You know, I think in my 20s, I was a lot less tolerant for the criticisms or for the kind of ideologies I didn't necessarily always believe in that a family member may have had or things like that. But as time has passed and I have gotten older, and I've also kind of have survived some pretty, you know, intense moments, I realized that I am starting to become a lot more tolerant and just accepting people for who they are, especially the people in my life that I can't ever change. You know, family is who they are, and they're always going to be who they are. And so you just have to make sure that you're just kind of always accepting those people because they are unconditional. They come with the territory. And you have to always just kind of learn how to appreciate them. I can now appreciate them much more now than I could in my 20s, when I would hate to go to certain family gatherings and I would hate to deal with certain people. Now it is just kind of, it just comes with it. Okay, so number 5 is about life passions. I've actually talked about this a couple of times in other videos, specifically about work, but I also think this one's just a pretty important thing, because you don't realize how often you get so entrenched with your day-to-day life that you probably don't have other interests outside of the day-to-day. And so I started finding and rediscovering lots of different kind of creative curiosities just to be a much more well-rounded person. I had picked up photography for many reasons. It was part of my recovery journey, but now I go out and I shoot. I take my camera and I look at the world through the lens. I picked up my writing. I went back to reading. So many other life passions. I started collecting vinyl records, like just discovering other types of passions, because the world is so big and there were so many different types of things that I wanted to learn and kind of have just kind of be a part of me, because I was such a creative and passionate person, and I wanted to kind of throw myself into all these kind of interests and hobbies, and realized that as I got older, I wanted to have a broader world. I didn't want to just be about work. I didn't just want to be about my home life. I wanted to be about things, and I wanted to be interesting. And for me, having those kind of passions and having those creative outlets was a way to do that. And it's amazing how much that leads to other types of curiosities, and just kind of, you realize is the kind of thing where you're kind of, you know, sitting in dinner parties or virtual parties and having a glass of wine and discussing different types of things, because you see the world a lot more broadly. And that's kind of, I feel that way very passionately about having hobbies and creative outlets, and just something that you just kind of need to allow yourself an opportunity to explore, to discover how much other things you may actually love that you don't even know that you love. So I don't know, what kind of adult lessons have impacted you the most? Are there kind of other things that have opened up for you as you've gotten older, as you mature in life, or as you just kind of walk your path and live your day-to-day life? I would love to hear kind of those kind of lessons and insights that have kind of come with time and that you've had an opportunity to kind of delve into and explore. Feel free to leave that stuff for me in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks.